so I've been at Tate sort of 9 years now. I think I can't claim that they weren't audience centric before I arrived. I think Tate is a very audience focused organization and does really care about the public and the public experience. And I almost say sometimes that Tate's quite evangelical about art and the power of art and the power of art to communicate, move, touch, connect, inspire. So I was arriving into a place where people were desperate for that and wanted more knowledge or insight around how they could actually do that. So I think I was pushing on a open door, as they say. But actually, I think that over the time I've been at Tate, that Tate has, in general, I'd say become more, just actually very hungry for those insights and very receptive generally to understanding those insights, actually.
Yeah. And there's definitely huge aspiration and appetite. Lots of organisations we partner with around being data-led, feeling confidence in the insights. But how do you kind of transform data from just being data into whether it's a story or what's the actionable kind of takeaway from this? Like what's yours and your team's approach to actually getting people to really kind of take on the data to take action?
I think communication of data, but more than, we have a kind of model. I love models as an insights person. We kind of live and breathe models, but always say that it's kind of data, then it's information, then it's insight, then it's strategy and frameworks in a kind of triangle, really. And that it's very important that we are not just data channelers. We're not just a kind of slot machine where you can put some kind of coin in and we're going to spit out some kind of answer. That is, I think, that is when data's dead in organizations, when there's just some kind of data nerd who just kind of channels data or is just drowned, and doesn't understand that stakeholders may not have the same appetite for numbers or the same ability to read data, or frankly the time, particularly the more and more senior. And so actually, it is really about a communication strategy, which is, I always talk about trying to land the golden nugget to the team, is that what is the insight in here that is really going to make the difference, that will really have the impact, that we can land with senior stakeholders who don't have time to read a 50-page PowerPoint presentation, or certainly get onto our Power BI dashboards and start fiddling with all the filters. And essentially, I think as well, it's about, we sort of have a kind of communication strategy, which is like, what's the 1 minute insight? What's the 5 minute one? What's the kind of 1.5 hour one? And very much trying to bring it to life, storytelling, building a narrative, those sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, we are big fans of frameworks and anything that just kind of also simplifies. You've got to interpret for stakeholders, like you say, but also like, what's the relevance of this? Because otherwise you could be paralysed continuing to analyse, look at stuff. But the reality is, organisations have got to progress. You've got to move forward.
Scaffolding. Everyone needs, and I love making sort of models, in terms of making things very explicit, which might be implicit in the data and insights. I think that probably is, hopefully, my extra skill, is that I can read data and turn it into models and storytelling.
Yeah. And quite a recent addition to your remit is kind of digital. And we spoke a little bit about kind of, what are people doing on the website? What does this mean for, what we need to do with our kind of experiences? How's that sort of additional shift of responsibility and I guess access to new data meant for you?
Yes, well, I think it's I often say this about insights, in that actually everything is data for us. Everything, everything is a data point, and it can just be in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, formats. And definitely digital data is just more data points that we've now got access to. I sometimes joke that I'm actually ahead of joining dots because what I'm doing is joining the kind of insights that come out of our data analysts, the kind of audience research we do, and now the digital insights. And actually, I found that the whole digital insights area has been really rich, actually, really interesting. It's at some level quite a Pandora's box because it wasn't a lens that we were particularly looking through in our team, but I think is a really important shift because of essentially everything, digital marketing, the impact of AIS, and sort of search and geo, SEO, end-to-end journey, the whole lot it just gives us a much better, all the time we're trying to build jigsaw puzzles and understand what's going on. And it's just a whole missing part of the jigsaw that we hadn't really had access to, really. So yeah, it's been really interesting. I think we're at the start of the journey with it, actually, in terms of extracting as much insight out of it and getting it into a format whereby we can make a difference. But already we've had some pretty good wins, actually, and so I'm quite happy
to
about
share
that. Well, really just looking at exhibition performance through what we'd call the conversion funnel, from landing on the web page through ticket purchase, and being able to see how that journey is working and where we might be able to work with digital product team or the marketing team in terms of tweaks and adjustments, and actually have seen shifts already. So that's been very rewarding.
Yeah. I love your sort of analogy of, because I've definitely had experience of it in many organisations where, one place I worked, data was literally in the basement, like in the furthest off, office in the organisation. And what I'm hearing you say is like the importance of that insight is how you make sense of the world now in terms of your organisation, your ecosystem, and all of the changes and the flux that's happening, and that needs to be embedded into everything that happens within your organisation. And it seems to me like Tate have quite a progressive, forward-thinking view around some of this, based on some conversations we have in other spaces. So I wonder what your thoughts are, that if you were an organisation that was going on a journey and you were kind of slightly less mature in the space of insights, what forms the basis of a really good kind of data and insight strategy? What would your advice be?
There's always acronyms in life, isn't it? I often say keep it simple, stupid. That KISS acronym is quite key. I think the trouble with data and insight is sometimes people have completely unrealistic nirvana ideals of, because they hear Amazon or they're on the receiving end of all these complex algorithms which are serving perfect customization and everything. Well, to get to that level of sophistication requires vast amount of money and an actual army of data analysts and tech people. And as particularly in the not-for-profit sector, it's usually like half a person whose role is suddenly to do data and insight or something. And therefore, I think it is about really, like everything, chunking it down. What can you achieve? What is doable with the resources you have? And then get that really working. And then it's like Lego, just start adding on. And in fact, that's really what happened in our team, is to say, we really started off, both, I'd say, data and audience research have gone on quite a journey. And we're really getting, pretty good with that now, I'd say. And now it's really about taking our digital insights on that same journey.